Hello and welcome to the annual Men's Conference, and today we're having a panel discussion on the topic gender-based violence. And to help us explore the topic, I'm joined by Moahi and Lutendo. Welcome, gentlemen. Today we're dealing with a significant topic, an important topic, but more than a topic, it's a phenomenon that we are exposed to as a society. And for many years, I think there have been attempts in terms of trying to address the phenomenon. And we've seen discussions throughout the year 2020 with an intent of addressing this issue that we are faced with as a society. And not to be too ambitious, we know that it's a huge issue, and this discussion alone will not be able to cover all the aspects, but we'll try by all means to do justice with the time that has been provided to us and the aspects that we intend to cover today. To open up and kickstart the discussion, I'm going to give our two speakers an opportunity to give opening statements, which will be guided by the question, what exactly is the issue? What are we dealing with here? Who wants to go first? I think I'll go with Mr. Moahi.
Yes, thank you, sir. Gender-based violence is defined as violence committed by one gender over the other. But statistics do show that men are the greater or biggest perpetrators of gender-based violence. Not to say that women do not commit acts of GBV, but men are the greater culprits by and large. So I thought we should start with that kind of a definition, and also it happens at different levels or spheres of society. It can happen between men and a woman. It can happen between an organization, against women. If in an organization, for instance, we only appoint men as managers and directors, that's gender-based violence. So it's at the level of institution. It can happen in the home. For example, if an uncle rapes a daughter or a niece, and the family decides, hey, let's sweep it under the carpet. It's gender-based violence, and it's committed by the whole family against the child. So it is perpetrated at different levels in society. And lastly, it's not only physical. It's financial. You can abuse your wife or your spouse financially. It's verbally. It's emotionally. It's sexually. So it's a broad thing. So I thought we should clearly define the animal that we are dealing with. It's very complex. It's a very complex subject, but it's a challenge that we have in society, and a challenge that we must commit to uproot in society. Yeah.
Thank you. Lieutenant.
Yeah, I think Moahi has really captured it very well, and I think just to add on what he was saying, it's that, how we see men being the biggest perpetrators, of gender-based violence, but the complexity of it comes from the fact that we try to look at it more at an upper level, so to speak, and really miss trying to deal with it from the root cause, which I think that has been the cause of us not really grasping, or having that exact solution in terms of how we can really deal with this problem, especially dealing with the men to help us as men, to really overcome, this issue. I mean, if you look at it, it starts from an individual perspective, and it's an interplay in terms of how me as a man, I relate to the community within which I'm growing up and I'm raised, and then it goes to the economic factors that comes into play, the cultural factors, around, how we are raised as men. I mean, there's so many aspects, that I think we'll touch on as we go, where we find that culturally we have these ways that we are brought up with that really give us from an early age, that as a young boy already you have this power over the young girls that you grow up around with, and then as you become a man, that as well expands even more. You get to a point where you get married, then there's issues of, or rather the approach of lobola, and then it gets interpreted in so many different ways. There's male circumcision, in terms of what is being taught in those environments where you get young boys going for male circumcision, and there's certain things that are taught and then probably misinterpreted when those boys come out to interact with society. So in a nutshell, those are the issues that we have to look at, and try and find the root cause of it, and then from there at least then we can be able to find a solution that will really help us alleviate this issue of gender-based violence.
Okay, so you both touched on really important aspects, and I think I want to build on that as an opening part of this discussion. One being the general rules that you've touched on, Lutendo, and how those have shaped men to occupy certain kinds of attitudes and stances within the society. And also Moagi speaks of violence, different kind of violence, because often when we speak about gender-based violence, we refer to the one that is being reported on media, which is often the physical violence, but there are other implicit types of violence that are taking shape within our context. And I just want to put in a spanner in the works and say there are people who are calling for the abolishment of patriarchy as a system, which is, we understand as we interpret it, that it's a social construct, right? And patriarchy addresses the issues of the fact that there are roles that are occupied by certain men, or men in the society in general, that are defined to be, appropriate for that kind of group. And there's a position that is attributed to that by mere fact of being a man. What is your response to that? Is abolishing the system, the patriarchal system, a solution to the entire thing? Well, anyone can go first.
Well, I think, look, especially the point of patriarchy, because, we interesting enough, when you talk about patriarchy, we've had this discussion briefly with one of the guys here within the church,
Sure.
talking about patriarchy within the church. And when you look at how, when you read the Bible, there's instances clearly where you read and you can see that it does touch on that, where when you interpret the scripture itself, you actually tend to see that there is a pattern of patriarchy happening, where you have, for example, it's the firstborn son to sort of become his father's right hand man, so to speak, whereas there's also the younger brother growing up, so there's always that pattern, even that you see from I would say a religion perspective. But going to your question, I don't think personally abolishment will be the go-to solution directly, because when you talk about abolishment, it touches on a lot of things, because when you look at how patriarchy stems from, in terms of our communities, we've got people that are leading communities, we've got kings and chiefs, and from a community perspective, that's where it stems from. So if government is just going to come and say we abolish, you will be touching on those cultural setups, and as you've seen, with everything that sort of government comes to without any form of proper consultation, there's always a backlash to it. There's always a negative response to it. But I think the best way will be have an open dialogue. Let's have some form of education, and let's speak to these sort of constituencies, these setups, the kings, the chiefs, the headsmen, that are leading communities, to say, what are you doing in your community, in as far as raising men and boys is concerned? What are you teaching the boys when it comes to treating women? How are women treated within the community? How in this day and age are we treating women? Because we've really moved a lot and a long way from the primitive times where women were just women to stay home, and then the men will go work and bring the supplies home. But now we were in an era where even women now are able to hold positions that are not only preferred for men, but even challenging those that things that were only done by men. You go into industries such as mining. Mining was only seen to be a thing for men, but now you've got women that are geologists, women that go underground and do all these things. So we need to really approach it in that way, that we start with some sort of dialogue, some sort of education, if needs be. Educate our people, and really from there try and pick up the root cause, find the thinking behind these men that are leading people in these communities, to say, what do they think? Because obviously what they think and what they interpret, they will impose on the rest of the community. So I think instead of just abolishing once and for all, let's look at options that we can find, and I'm a firm believer that even sometimes easy solutions or quick solutions, are sometimes the easiest way to solve a problem. We don't have to always go to the complex route of just say, let's go and abolish. Yeah, I think that will cause a much more instability, So I think we should try and find a different way.
Yeah, great question. I agree with Lutendo, 100%. There's a saying that says, don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. So we need to redefine patriarchy. Like Lutendo said, what are we teaching the young men? How are we treating the women, and so on? So we need to redefine patriarchy. Remember, patriarchy, it's a leadership by male. Now, when you read the scriptures, the Bible says the husband is the head of the wife. You see, so the mistake that we have done is to extrapolate that and apply it into politics, business, at school, at the workplace, in the corporate world, and so on, where we have moved from patriarchy to sexism. You see, where sexism is discrimination of women.
Yeah.
You see, and you see, once you start doing that, that means your makeup and your attitudes and your beliefs, they are also wrong. So that means you also place less value upon women. That's why you would, I was discussing this thing with my wife, that when you talk about sexism, when you, let's say I'm in a panel, I'm interviewing candidates who want to be CEOs. A man comes and then I assume competency upon the man, just because he's male. You see, women, I assume that now she must work hard and she must prove herself, she must have a PhD, she must have 10 years of experience. But the men, just by appearing, I assume, no, that one is competent. You see, that's sexism, and that's abuse of patriarchy. Because men and women are equal. You see, Martin Luther King addressed the issue of racism, and one of his famous quotes is that people should not be treated by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. So we must take that into gender-based violence discussion and say people must not be treated according to their gender, but the content of their character.
Yeah.
You see, men must stop sexism and sexism, just like racism, is also institutionalized. You see, so we need to uproot that. We need to raise our young men differently and teach them differently, give them different attitudes, different beliefs, and stop abusing the scriptures. You see, and start addressing this thing. This thing is a problem, and what fuels it is this sexism, because it's the underlying driving force behind gender-based violence, because it puts less value, upon the women. You see, once I'm in a corporate world, I'm equal with a woman. I'm not her head. I'm the head of my house, of my wife in my house. You see, I'm not the head of all women in society. You see, we compete equally. If I must be a CEO, she can also be a CEO. She's also gifted by God. The same thing. If she can preach, she must preach. If I can preach, I must preach. So we must use people according to the content of their character, not because they are male or female. So yes, we should redefine patriarchy and not abuse it. But the real enemy here is sexism, and then it manifests itself with gender-based violence and all of these other ills and crimes in society.
Yeah. Let me articulate the very same point that you are raising, Mark, into the question that I want to ask. And this stems from, so I'm just going to give a brief historical background, then ask a question after that. So there's an idea of, especially in this case, men are regarded as the oppressor in the context of GBV.
Yeah.
And just to make reference to works of people like Paulo Freire, who says that the person who's doing the oppressing, who's oppressing the other, cannot be involved in the emancipation of the person who's oppressed. Do you think as men we are in a position to lead the discussion of rectifying the issues of gender-based violence? And to what degree do we have that allowance in terms of the right, because we are regarded as the ones who are doing the oppression? Are we in any position to speak with authority to say we have the solutions to addressing this issue? Or do you think women should take the front lead in terms of addressing the issue that we're dealing with now?
Yeah, I think we need both men and women. It cannot be the men alone or the women alone. We need both the men and the women to address this thing. I will not agree with the view that men, because they are perpetrators, therefore they cannot play a significant role. I will even say that men can play a bigger role because of how men have shaped society, you see, and mainly because of sexism. So sexism, and it's because men therefore had more resources. Men are the presidents, they are the CEOs, they are the chairpersons, and all those things. So they are even in a better position to mobilize resources against gender-based violence, and maybe when men articulate it, it will strike a chord with other men, because men are the biggest perpetrators. Yeah. So maybe when a man says, "Gentlemen, what we are doing is wrong," maybe the men will hear. It's like maybe in racism, when a white man stands and say, Racism is wrong. Maybe it might carry more weight than those who are suffering the effects of it. So men are significant partners and stakeholders in this war against gender-based violence, and we need them because of their position in society at the current level. If you look, for example, into politics, where they've really fought this GBV and sexism and so on, especially when it comes to representations in the parliament and the numbers, and in the political sphere, they've really pushed it. And it was the men, who were in the forefront. Of course, the women played a role as well, but there's equal representation, and that is also part of it, because you need to see women in leadership if you value them. You see, because these things are underlying beliefs and attitudes. So if you value them, you need to see women as well in leadership. I keep on referring to racism. You cannot say you are a transformed company where from the top down it's just white males especially. And then you say, we are transformed. No, we want to see it physical, you see. And that is also an affirmation. In church, when a woman stands up and preach, that is an affirmation to say, firstly, the church believes this woman is gifted. The church believes this woman can play a role in terms of the Great Commission, preaching the gospel everywhere. The church believes this woman, is also anointed, and so on and so on. So it goes back to there to say men have, because of their current position, even in the church, all the men, all the pastors are men, or the majority of them. In the world, all the presidents are men, or the majority of them. There's, the New Zealand lady here and there and so on. So we need the men, and therefore, because the men of their position, they've got access to those resources and influence. So they must use those things to fight against gender-based violence. So therefore, they are a significant stakeholder in the fight against gender-based violence.
Lieutenant, as you respond to that, so you're going to respond, but I want to come back to what Moahi said earlier before you gave this response, Mr. Moahi, that you are a head of your family, the head of the women that you meted with. And we're going to dive into another aspect without conflicting the two issues. I'm just going to give you a chance, Moahi, but I'm going to build on that one, so look out for that question.
I think, I have to agree with Moahi, just based on the fact that the role that men are playing in society. I think if I just go back to the opening statement, and when we speak about the headsmen, the chiefs and the kings, it's all majority men. And already that in itself, in that context, there's already a battle, of saying, but every time there's a woman coming up claiming some sort of chieftaincy, it's an issue. The men are not really taking it at all, for a woman to rise up to that sort of position. So going back to your question of can men be the ones to emancipate, either themselves or other men out of this? Most definitely, yes. And obviously with the balance of saying you can't really have men alone and you can't have women alone, but you need both of them. But I think, again, women, just to add on what Moahi was saying, as men, we should be driving it from a point, I think, of self-introspection first, because I believe that for me to be able to can call out another man, it has to start with me. I have to ask myself the question, what am I doing about gender-based violence? Am I enforcing some sort of abuse within my household, and correct it from there, and really challenge myself from there? And if I can overcome that, I think then it becomes easy to take the next step to be able to call out another man and say, hey, hang on, but what you're doing is incorrect, And if I'm talking from a point of having taken the step myself, from my own personal space, I think then it makes it easy, to be able to call out another man. So I think, in general, we definitely need both men and women, but men have to be, the key drivers. And again, being pushed by, the fact that how the positions that men hold, in society. I think, if anything, a man is most likely to listen to another man, and that's why we'll have these forums of let's come and talk as men, let's hear each other out, because the minute sometimes you try and bring in women, not to say we shouldn't, but it requires some sort of analysis or sort of timing where you need to be bringing in women at a certain point in time where when they come in with the input, it will be to solidify what we as men amongst ourselves have already established. I think also in doing that, you shouldn't be doing it saying that no, women must always be in the backseat, but there has to be some sort of balance in a sense that when do you bring the women in without infringing on either the men's rights or standpoint, as well as the same way that how do you then have men speaking into these situations without infringing on the women's, and I mean, if you look around, especially in social media, whenever there's an issue of gender-based violence, when you read the comments, you can hear that this guy is putting a comment, he's trying to drive something, a point, but the way he's putting it across, it's already infringing on the woman's either emotions or feeling about the whole case. So, there's issues of approach, there's issues of tone as well, where that we need to really, I think, work around, as men to say, how do you address this without infringing on the woman in one way or the other?
Sure. So in both the responses that you gave, I think interpreting them, they happen within a context of there is a particular established social contract between the people involved, men and women. Mm-hmm. So if it's family, there's a husband and a wife. If it's work, there's the community of practice. Mm-hmm. So you work for the same company. But I want to bring in a question of what happens in those cases of the gender-based violence that we see being perpetuated outside those kind of structures, outside relationship structures, where a random guy can go and attack a random lady that he has never met before. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the root cause? Understanding that obviously culture is involved, how the person was raised. Mm-hmm. But what do you think is the other aspects that influence that kind of a behavior? For someone to go out there, attack someone who they don't know completely, mm-hmm. And feel like they have a right over their body or whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. And how do we address that? Because in that case, you don't have a specific approach in which you can deal with an issue. And that is to say, you don't have a family structure that you can address the whole thing. It's just a random guy out there. How do you work around it? Mm. And let me just add a question to that. Mm. When men are required to respond to that type of a situation, and we've seen cases like the incident that happened where one of the actors, the celebrity actors, tried to intervene when a woman was attacked and he got killed in the intervention. So how do we work around those dynamics as we try to address the issue?
Yeah, indeed. Even the case Yaha Winene, it's that kind of a case where a man who was a stranger to her, attacked her, killed her, raped her, whatever the issue is. So, Litondo spoke about how do we raise the man child, So because the issue of gender-based violence, it's very complex. Yes, in tackling it, what would be the low-hanging fruit? The quick solution would be harsher sentences. Let's hit them with harsher sentences, which works because then it will change people's attitudes. Because people will realize, hey, I don't want those consequences. I don't want to go away for over 10 years, whatever. But that is that is very reactive, and you know, some revolutionary once said, "Claim no easy victories." You know, so we need to do the work with regard to how do we shape the boy child, so that as a society, we don't release somebody who will work at the post office, who will think they are entitled to the woman's body, they're entitled to rape a woman, they're entitled to do as they please, you know, with the women. So there is a lot of work that we need to do. You know, there's this thing in the natural science. This approach is called the ecosystem approach, and that approach says every aspect of the ecosystem is important and it plays a role. You know, if you remove frogs, you say, I don't like frogs, they make noise at night, you know, you will find that mosquitoes will start, you know, to be a problem. Why? Because you removed an aspect of the ecosystem because it was causing a problem to you, but you caused a bigger problem. So we need to start to say, what is happening at the family level? You know, if you look at the South African society, where many households are broken families, levels of divorces are high, there's abuse, you know, in the family. You know, these boys, they don't grow with a father figure, with role models. You know, if you are a father and you are modeling a role of beating up a woman or a role of using violence to solve your problem, you are stuck in your debates and arguments with your wife, you know, suddenly you want to clap her because you are stuck in your thinking, you know. So you need to say, as men, you know, if you take your car to a mechanic to be fixed, a mechanic or technicians or whatever they call themselves has a toolbox, and in the toolbox got spanners and so on, and you use those things for different problems. So in the man's toolbox, why is it he only have one tool, which is violence? You know, no, this lady wants to leave me, I'm going to kill him. That's how I'm going to solve the problem, you know. What about walking away? What about leaving her? You don't own her, you know. So the issue is very complex. We need to deal with attitudes, entitlement. We need to deal with toxic masculinity, you know, where somebody thinks, you know, because, you know, physically, obviously, men are stronger than women. And therefore, somebody thinks, you know, they must use their strength to harm a woman, you know. What about using that strength to protect a woman and, you know, and making women safe? Because God gave us the physical strength, not to abuse women, but to use it in terms of building the family. So the solution to these things, there's got to be long-term. Yes, there will be short-term solutions. Government obviously will quickly say, okay, harsher sentences. That will help, but it's not the only thing. We need to do the work. We need to mentor these young men. We need to be father figures. We need these kinds of forum where we address men. We need to empower men to know that using violence is wrong, and it's not the only solution that men must use to solve, you know, their problems. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah, I think just to add again on what Moach was saying, you know, I think the very fundamental part of this whole issue is it's the family structures, you know, within which we come from as men and we are raised. You know, I mean, going back to your question of saying, I mean, if a random guy can just walk in the street, meets a random woman, does not even know her, and he just starts beating her up, what causes that? Who wakes up in their right mind to do that? And when you look at that specific individual, you know, I think a few research cases, that have been done around this issue of gender-based violence have really gone to reveal that when you look at the fundamentally or primarily the family structure where the young man or the man comes from, you find that there's some level of brokenness, either there were issues with the mother, or in most cases with the father, maybe through divorce, or the father just decided to leave the household and didn't want anything to do with the family. And then as a child, or as that boy child, you grow up with that anger and bitterness, and for whatever reason, you develop this hatred and this bitterness towards women, or irrespective of age, and it just builds more and more and more, and I mean, when you talk about anger, it's a very poisonous emotion that it just poisons your whole system, from your mind, your thinking, your heart, you just become toxic, as a human being. And whenever, because now you've developed that sort of hate towards this specific gender, whenever you see them, it just sparks, that anger again, and you just want to let out, and in most cases that's what has been proven to say, it's some level of bitterness that comes fundamentally from a family structure, and in between, probably growing up, you find that you as a man, we obviously were egoistical as men, but then when that ego is trampled upon, especially by a woman, it tends to leave a very bad mark, and you just take that and it becomes a toxic thing that you live with, and then eventually you can't really live with it within you. Somehow you just have to have an outlet. But now you as Mark was mentioning, that now your only option of dealing with this issue, the only tool you have in your toolbox is violence, and that shouldn't be it, and the way to address it will be, how then do we go back to that fundamental issue of saying we deal with the boy child from that early, childhood stage, instead of being reactive at a later stage to say, when they've committed a crime, let's deal with the harsher sentence. But there's only so much harsher sentences that you can bring, but then they don't even guarantee a revived or a renewed man, eventually. So I think we can be a bit more proactive and say, how do we approach the boy child at an early childhood stage and start teaching them, and start changing their way of thinking towards women, towards young girls, and really drive in a message of equality from that early age, a message of oneness, of unity, to say this person is just for the mere fact that they're of a different gender from you does not make them less of human beings. They're just equally as human beings. As a matter of fact, first and foremost, we are all human beings, equally so. The rest, gender and age, race, those are just a secondary aspects, The primary one is the fact that we are all human, and let's treat each other from that level or from that point, And I think once we drive in that message, to us as men from an early stage, I think it will go a long way, rather than, looking at the reactive way of saying only when they've committed a crime then we'll give a harsher sentence. It doesn't really address the problem at the root cause. I think that's where we miss it, because we all automatically we think sending that man who has committed a crime to jail for 25 years or more, when they come out, they will be better people. It's not all of them that will come out as better people, And again, I think even at that level, we also need to probe to say, what education are we giving those that are being incarcerated for committing such crimes? Are we just leaving them there to rot and die? Are we trying to build some form of a reform in them? That should they get out, then they are reformed and they are better people than they were when they went in.
Okay. Yeah. And so knowing that we obviously don't have total control over the influence of your child at home. And I'm saying this because there's a lot of openness now in the society. So they're exposed to a lot of stuff in the media, television, both television as well as social media as well. And we cannot deny that these things shape people and they shape the kind of characters that they embody, right? So how do you, knowing that families have this important role to play in raising children, raising boys from a young age into boys that respect and value women, how do you bridge that gap between your own influence as a family on the boy's life versus what they're exposed to? And I'm going to give an example of music that they listen to. Let's take, for instance, hip-hop and house and whatnot. So the videos that they watch where there's objectification of women, how do you bridge that gap? Because you may have control in terms of the dinner table or taking your son to bed, taking them to school, but you don't have control beyond what they engage with when they are out of your sight. So how do you work around those issues? How do you bridge that gap?
You know what? I think that is one of the most difficult, thing to can cover holistically, especially, when you talk about what's within our control. Even when you talk about grown men and women, in a church environment, for example, where you would preach a certain message to drive a certain point and bring about change. You can preach it from a pulpit, but as soon as we leave the church hall, wherever the message is being preached, you really have no control of how they will process it and whether they will do exactly what you preached or advised. Same thing, within the family structure, to say what we have control of, I think let's maximize on it. If I have a boy child in my household and we have frank conversations about these issues, about watching certain content, if I'm talking to a boy child who's able to comprehend, I'm able to sit him down and tell him to say, but listen, when you watch a video that really gives you a different view of women, that's not really what it is. Have that frank conversation to say, that's not how you objectify women. Women are not things. They are not objects. To be admired by men, even to a point of them becoming you use women to fulfill certain desires in you. And when I say that, I'm talking in the context of outside marriage, where you just see women as sex objects, But I think, have that frank conversation with them to say, young men, this is not how we view women. Women are just as human. Women are critical in terms of their roles in society. That even when you are not there with them, when they are confronted with these videos, with this music that they listen to, the message that you have shared with them, the point that you've driven into them to say, this is not right, will always be there. But unfortunately, you cannot really control the decision that they will take at that point in time. I think the point I'm making is, let's give our young men information. Let's give them enough information to make informed decisions, and even to a point that they should know that when they make a certain decisions, it will always be followed by a certain consequence. To say, if you continue to view women in this instant, it will damage you mentally, which will eventually lead to you abusing women, which is the worst part of it all, of this process. To say it starts like this, eventually you're gonna end up being like this. You give them all these scenarios, and you really be frank with them to say every decision that you make, has a consequence, including that of how you view women. you know, whether in your own household or even in society.
Okay, before we move on to Moach, Moach, you'll take two questions
Okay.
with the follow-up that I have for Lieutenant. So do you think censorship from the regulation side of things, the government and how it controls the content that the entire country is consuming, do you think it's a solution?
Partly, yeah. I think it is. It is. I have to agree with it. You know, and I mean, even myself growing up, you know, you see, for example, a packaged hip hop album, and it has that censorship notice to say explicit content. You know, and you are below the age of 18, and you listen to it, and you hear that the things that are being said in this music, you know, are really above me processing them. And you know, as a child, when you grow up, you know, you're just a sponge. You just absorb even the things that you don't really understand.
Yeah.
But you end up replicating, you know. And it was only at a later stage when I was older that I realized that the importance of censorship, you know, is very key. You know, and hence I'm agreeing with it that only in hindsight I realized the importance of it, and therefore agree that I think it's key that it continues, that, you know, you censor these things, because now I see the reason, you know, behind it. You know, it did damage me, you know, to a certain aspect in terms of the language that I would use to speak and things like that. But fortunately, I had an opportunity that I was at a stage in my life where I could sort of have a chance to sort of get it off my system, you know, to realize that actually it's wrong. You know, I don't need to be doing things or to be talking like this and being influenced by music in this way, and therefore start choosing the type of music that I listen to and so forth and so forth. Therefore, you see, I was able to make an informed decision going forward about my life, to avoid bad language, to avoid, be it how I would look at women, or based on what I was listening to on the music in terms of what the music was saying about a woman. Yeah. You see, so I was fortunate to have been in a position where I was able to reflect, you know, and make an informed decision going forward about my life. So, yeah, I really do agree with the censorship. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Mr. Moach?
Yes, I think raising a child in this day and age, it's a big task. It's a big responsibility, because there are various sources of influence that you know, that might also, you know, sway the child, you know, to a negative path. You know, as the Bible says that you know, the narrow is the road that leads to life, but broad is the road that leads to death. So raising a child in this day and age, it's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, we made an example, you know, pop culture, hip hop, and so on. You know, and you find that the kids nowadays, that's the music they listen to.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? And when you look those videos, women are objectified. Those women are hardly dressed there, you know. And the funny thing, the guy is wearing a very big jean and oversized jackets and all those. The guy is covered, even the shoes are so big, the boots and everything. So the guy is heavily covered, dressed, and the woman is almost naked.
Yeah.
So and that will translate into society, because now it's something that is portrayed. You know, like people say, television means you tell a vision.
Yeah.
You know, like the Bible says, write a vision down so that those who run with it. You know, so a woman is then objectified. This guy, then it's a value that is put into the subconscious of this boy. Says, that woman, the language, the lyrics, the videos, and so on. The guy becomes a manager at work. There's a junior, there's an intern. He sees an object. That woman wants to rise in a career path. The guy says, Pella, you can't just rise.
Yeah.
For me to sign here, you must do me sexual favors and so on. So those are the things we need to fight against, because they are instilling values that are contrary what we want in society. And those values, they are part of the things that influence gender-based violence.
Yeah.
You know, because now this boy or this young man sees women as objects. You know, every time a woman passes there, he sees, hey, you know, how can I sleep with that woman? You know, and then it builds this thing in them that you find that they value sleeping. If you sleep with many women, you are the man. You see, so we need to uproot those things, and to some extent, I feel we have directly or indirectly neglected the boy child. As men, you know, women have, you know, they form societies, they put money together, they buy things together, they do this, they do that. And when they meet and they, over a meal, they discuss, they empower one another and all those things. But men have not created those type of platforms where they empower each other, they talk to each other, they start challenging these things and uprooting them so that they are able to teach them to the next generation. Because mentorship is very important. A society will not survive without mentorship. And mentorship is not a formal contract or no, I'm going to mentor you. No. If you are a father, already you are a mentor. You have a daughter, a boy, you are a mentor. They say, in fact, you are the role model. You know, you cannot say, Will Smith is my role model. No, you never see Will Smith. You see him on videos. But you see your father showing you how a woman is treated. You know, how a family is led. You know, there are values. You know, there's this saying that say, monkey see, monkey do, which means that people learn by observation. You know, how the father wakes up in the morning, works, do this, do that, help here, do this. You know. And place values on women. So we have a challenge where we need to mentor the next generation of men and teach them the right things so that we avoid gender-based violence. You know. On censorship by government, yes, it will help. And all that. But we should be careful that we don't neglect our responsibility and give it to government. Because the state, it's a secular state, you know. You know, for instance, not everything that is legal, it's biblical and it sounds scripturally, you know. According to the Bible, for instance, abortion is murder. You know, when you read scriptures, God will prophesy about a child that is not born. You see, Mary, they said to her, "You will have a child. You will name him Jesus." He was not born. You see, but it is legal. You see, so we must be careful that we don't neglect our responsibility to government. Hence I said that, you know, raising children, it's a big responsibility. I know we come back home tired in the traffic and all that, but as parents, we have a responsibility to these children to mentor them, to guide them, to discipline them, to give them biblical perspective, you know, on matters, to say, you know what, that video, did you see that video? How that rapper or that artist is objectifying women in the video. That is not correct. Women have a value. Women are not sexual objects, you know, to be entertained by men, but there's a value that God has placed upon them, you know. So we need to deal with those things, but indeed, yes, the culture can be negative, especially pop culture, and we need, you know, when we grew up in a society where it takes a village to raise a child, where if I was misbehaving, any parent could clap me and says you are wrong and all that, and it was acceptable. But that is changing nowadays and all that, you know. So but we do have a responsibility to model the right things to the next generation.
Hey, you're touching on key issues, and really, if we look at everything that we have spoken about here, I think it all centers on the behavior of individuals within the society. And my concern, and I think because now we're running against time, we're actually going closer to an hour now. But perhaps as a last segment of this discussion, because if it all revolves around behavior, and I'm of a view that behavior is hard to regulate. You may hold perhaps contrary views to what I have, but how do you, because in our African culture and communities where there's no embracement of, let's say, mental issues, for instance, and if Philip in nature is sadistic, so which means he enjoys inflicting pain on another human being and finds pleasure in that. But because it's not picked up as a condition, it's picked up as, this person is just misbehaving or it's just naughty or whatever the case is. How do you begin to even rectify or work towards correcting behavior and also building on what Moache has said, that it's a secular state and we have a popular culture that is predominant in our society, and we have people who can choose ways of life. So if let's say right now we're addressing a Christian community, it would be easy because they are same values that we share and therefore would speak upon those values. But if you are addressing an entire nation that is informed by different value systems, is influenced by different things, has people who have conditions, personality disorders, psychological issues, how do you begin to work around that in an African context to sort of bring those things to the fore and say these have an impact, and how do you go about resolving that? What's the best way that we can address GBV in our context as Africans?
Well, no, I must say it's a very interesting and I think difficult question in a sense that for every issue that we have, predominantly, in our society, it's that there's always a culture clash. How we were raised and where we come from, it always had a different view. And now having to deal with these issues, it becomes almost impossible because trying to get to the root of how we are raised, it's always a challenge, But personally, I think it's possible. It's just finding ways, and the ways are there, ways to really get into those primary situations, those community situations, where we as boys are growing up, where we are raised, in as much as, yes, it cannot be a government thing, and looking at where sort of government is placed and where we are as the people, is that eventually, even the very government that's there, it's placed by us as the people. When you look at it, sort of fundamentally, in the sense that we put in the votes to get them there. Yeah. So in the same way, we have that power, within us to really drive these messages, of how we raised our boys and young men. And I think one of those ways is, I think it's to find ways to eventually get to educate, and have open talks, within our communities about these things. The things that you mentioned, are issues of mental illness, and culturally we look at them as it's just one of those. It should happen, and when you look at it in this day and age where we are, there's ways to deal with mental illness. There's ways to deal with all these compulsive disorders and all these other disorders that we're going through. But then these are the things that culturally, when we were raised, you raised in such a way that they were not there, although they were there, but they were sort of swept under the carpet because maybe there were no professional ways of dealing with it. we just made them to be some sort of a taboo that had no solution and therefore should just be swept aside. But it can be, not in this day and age where, you know, the behavioral patterns are changing due to access to information, access to you know, things like television and entertainment. You know, it's no longer, you know, one small black and white TV that you use a car battery to watch with. But, you know, I can watch TV on my phone. You know, even the phones themselves have evolved so much. So everything has gone with time. And I think culture as well should somehow, you know, find a way. And when I say culture, I'm saying we as the people, you know, we need to find a way that we are sort of up to speed with the changing of times and the availability of information, that we use it positively, you know, to come back to our own societies and educate our people and bring them up to speed to say, hey, there's help for mental illness, there's help for these compulsive disorders and all these other things. You know, it can be something that we always look at and say, because it was not common, therefore it almost doesn't exist, you know. The fact that it's there 1 out of 10, it means that it's a problem, you know, one too many. So I believe that education, it's one of the best tools that we can use. And when I say education, I'm not really confining it to a form of a classroom, but I'm talking of the societies that we're in. I spoke of, you know, your kings, your chiefs, your headsmen. Those are people that are in positions of power, of positions of influence. You know, you use those people, you know, to drive the level, the form of education that you want to get to the people, you know, to the general society. You use those people to drive the message, because those are the people that are always listened to. You know, use all those avenues, you know, because I think that's what we have. You know, those are the role models that we have in front of us. As Moachi said, that, you know, the headsman in my community, he's the one guy who assumes a position of responsibility, and therefore automatically I would look up to him, because this is a guy who overlooks not only his family but the entire community. So, you know, when that inspires some sort of, you know, confidence to say, you know, as a man, so it's possible, you know, to be a man and have broad shoulders to can carry a whole community. You know, that's a role model for me, and therefore when that guy speaks, you know, I'm most likely going to listen to him, you know, because I've got some sort of identification with him, you know. Unlike, you know, when you try to have one political rally every 2 or 3 years, you know, there's no impact there. But this guy I see every day. I see him doing things every day. You know, I can relate to him every day. So let's try and find a level of education that we can drive through this person or through these people that have got or that are in positions of influence within our societies.
So, you know, like they say, hate people hate others, you know. So you find that there are lots of men out there who are hate, who are bleeding, you know. And as an outlet, they commit gender-based violence, you know. So I think as men, you know, we need psychological therapy. We need help. We need to speak. You know, as men, we must learn from women. You know, women, they've got friends. They come together and all that. And you know, as men, you know, like they always say, every Paul needs a Barnabas and a Timothy. You see, so there must be somebody who mentors you. There must be somebody who mentor. There must be somebody you can talk to say, you know what, I've reached a deadlock with my wife. I've reached a cul-de-sac. You know, so you must have an outlet, and men don't have an outlet. You see, men are not truthful. Men, if you ask a man, how's your relationship with your wife, you get a diplomatic answer. If you ask the wife, how's your relationship with your husband, you get the truth. You see, you will think, do these people live in the same house? You know? So men needs to be truthful, men needs to be honest. That's what I'm saying. We need to learn from women. Women can call each other and say, hey, Choma, I'm going through this and this and that.
Yeah.
Men, we can meet and watch soccer together and all those things and talk about soccer. And then 3 months down the line, we are surprised. Hey, you are divorced. Hey, but we were with you there. We spent 3 hours eating biltong, watching soccer, making jokes and all that. And you fail to say, hey, guys, I'm struggling, Pen. How do I work out this thing? So we are always surprised. We are always surprised because men don't want to talk. Men are bottling things out inside. And when you bottle things inside, there's going to be a trigger. And then we're surprised, hey, so-and-so beat up Mamfundisi. Hey, wara. You see, because we need to learn from women without being feminine. You see, we must not move from toxic masculinity to something else.
Yeah.
You see, we are men, and that's how God created us. We need to value who we are and remain who we are. If you look at men and women, men are the only ones who always want to be affirmed that they are men. Men will go to the mountain just so that they can be told, windowed, But before you went there, you were a man.
Yeah.
You see, but that's the makeup of men. So I'm saying, let us not maybe if there's a word called demasculine men or something. But we need to learn from women. We need to be relational, where we have somebody where we can talk to, so that we are able to be helped. And there are things we need to change in culture. For women, it's easy to go for counseling. How many men go for counseling? When I was hijacked, I went for counseling. You see, my counselor helped me to get a perspective on matters. Otherwise, I would be a prisoner of that event. Now I know that event does not define me. I'm not a victim. I live my life. I'm not living in fear. I live my life according to my dictates. What I want to do. Not what if they will do this? No. So men don't want to go for psychology. They think it's taboo. So there are things that we need to change. And unless we address those things, we're going to struggle to address gender-based violence.
Sure. Yeah, no, this is a mouthful. And because of time, we just going to have closing statements, right? We conducted a survey in line with the panel discussion. And most of the things have been addressed, even though they were not addressed as responding to those specific questions. But there were questions that were direct, such as, and this is informed by what I said earlier, that within the Christian community there is presupposedly the same values that guide us, right? But it was not surprising, but surprising nonetheless, that when we looked at the survey and the questions that we answered, one of the questions that really caught my attention was a response to the statement, my partner assaults me every time when I arrive late from work, even when I have informed them. And 76.8% said strongly agree. Right? And this is a survey that we conducted within the church context. And the other one was, my partner assaults me frequently and consequently promises not to assault me. And 73.9% said they strongly agree. Now, this puts us in a very difficult position, especially with this engagement that we are having, to say that as much as values are the same, do you think, as closing statements, do you think we are in a PR management type of journey, especially because GPV talks happen every year when something springs up, when we hear that there's another victim next month, there's going to be a whole idea, let's engage. You'll see a lot of seminars, panel discussions and whatnot. Do you think we are in a PR thing, considering the context of the survey that we have conducted and the fact that there are men and women, because this is not gender specific, so there are men and women who are saying they are being assaulted right at this moment that we are having this engagement. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to personally agree that we are in some sort of PR management, type of approach, because even when I was, just reading through the different articles, researches that were done around GBV, just in preparation for this, that's what what triggered in my mind was, it is some sort of PR, because until it was August, I mean, if you think of last month, there was no any issues raised around gender-based violence, except if maybe there was an incident where a prominent female was probably assaulted and then made it public, or maybe it was even not a prominent person, but it's a story that made its way into the media, and then it became a social media discussion type of thing.
Yeah.
But then over and above, if you look at the entire 12 months, we only have August, which is Women's Month, and then later in December we have the 16 days of activism against on violence against women and young girls. In between, there isn't really much happening, and I think it's one of maybe the things that we need to really fix, to say, let's not wait for those 2 months. We've got 10 other months, that we're still living with women around us and that are being abused. What are we doing? And I think if we stop reducing it to the month of August and December and political rallies and whatnot, and make it an everyday issue, discuss it every day, confront it every day, I think it would be a very good starting point as well. Because, I mean, when you run a PR thing, psychologically people already know that, it's the month of August, we know this is what we're going to hear. So even when you say anything, no one is even listening, because they already had preconceived approach to it, to say, we know this is what they're going to say. It's the month anyway. But then when it's every day, you can't run away from it, whether it's Sunday in a church environment, whether it's at work, it's a constant topic, that's buzzing around and being confronted. I think then we can then move away from the whole PR approach of it and become more realistic, in terms of approach. And I think in that way, when we do it that way, that approach then takes it away from expecting government, to be the ones that's running with it to us as society, because then when the discussions are happening on a daily, it's within the society, But then when we leave it to government, I mean, it's government. They will wait for August. They will wait for December, and that's it. That's how they've always been reacting to it as well. But then when we drive it on a daily basis, then it also forces government to also have a different way to react, or even to be proactive, even better about it, in terms of helping us as society, to solve the problem.
Sure. Yeah, those are bad numbers that you have reported. Over 70%, admitting to gender-based violence. So, that tells us it's happening in the life of the church. It's happening in church. It's not something that is exclusive, or it's happening somewhere up there, but something that we deal with, and the perpetrators are amongst us. Yeah. They are ourselves. We are the perpetrators. So, and also it is also reported that there are, or 1 in 25 cases are being reported. I think I read that statistic somewhere as I was preparing. And even so, those who report, at some point they withdraw the case, for one reason or the other, whether the breadwinner is the one who might now have to go to prison, and what about the well-being of the family and all those things, one reason or the other. Or the family says, hey, but you cannot charge this guy, what, forgive him, whatever. So it's a big problem, the issue here, gender-based violence. We have a long way to go with regard to addressing it. So it tells us as a church that we have a big challenge in our hands, and the way as a church we need to respond to these things so that we are relevant. Remember, a church exists within society. It's not exclusive. So when you come to church, you come with your reality. You see. So then the church needs to speak, the wisdom of God, godly counsel, into your reality, And the Bible says, "Do not be conformed to the standards of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." So we need to address this thing. We need to be able to deal with them. We need to have structures. How are we going to address this? How are we going to support and all those things? And I like what you said, that you are surprised but not surprised, because the statistics they do say, for instance, GBV is committed 56% by intimate partner and so on. So these things are happening, and they are happening in church, and we need to address them. We need a strategy where we are going to address them, we are going to expose them. For instance, we might need people to come and testify to say, you know what, I'm a Christian, I've been born again for 10 years, but I've been abusing my wife, and I'm on the road to recovery. We need to expose these things and show light and address, so that we don't assume that, no, this thing is an abstract thought, it's something in the newspapers. No, it's something in the pews, the benches of the church, and it's happening, and we need to address it.
Thank you, Mr. Mark, and thank you, gentlemen, for joining us in this discussion. As mentioned earlier, that we can't obviously cover the entire aspects of the discussion, but what we've done here is to lay out perhaps a foundation for future engagements within our own context as a church. And I think one thing that maybe we'll do in upcoming events is to deal with it in isolation in terms of, if we're looking at family, we're looking at family. If we're looking at the psychological part of things, looking at the psychological part of things, so that we can expand and come up with at least interventions that we can start embarking on as a church. So we thank you for joining us in this discussion, and we hope that you have learned a thing or two, and you're going to go out there and influence people within your circle, and also implement these things in your own journey as a man and as a woman. So thank you.